Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meeting Act has been given by the Board Secretary in the following manner. Posting written notice on the official school bulletin board at the Administration Building on August 22nd, 2019. Transmitted notice to the Courier Post and Philadelphia Inquirer on August 22nd, 2019. And transmitted notice to the Clerk of Cherry Hill Township on August 22nd, 2019. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. After the Pledge of Allegiance, please remain standing for a moment of silence as we remember Mr. Arthur Lewis, who passed away last week. Not only did Mr. Arthur Lewis distinguish himself during his career in law enforcement, he was also a dedicated community member who served as a member of the Cherry Hill Board of Education. We are grateful for his groundbreaking service and for the legacy that he has left in our community. Thank you very much. We're going to start out with our roll call. Ms. Sugars?
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mrs. Neary?
Here.
Mr. Avadia?
Here.
Mrs. Seidel?
Here.
Mrs. Scarpolino? Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Mrs. Stratton?
Here.
Mrs. Tong? Mr. Goodwin?
First up is the approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve minutes from the regular action meeting dated July 23rd, 2019, the board work session special action meeting dated July 9th, 2019, and the executive session meetings dated July 9th and 23rd, 2019. Can I have a second? Ms. Neary. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes.
Mrs. Neary?
Yes.
Mr. Avadia?
This is about approval of the minutes?
Yes.
Abstain.
Mrs. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz?
Yes.
Mrs. Stratton?
Yes.
Tonight, our first item for discussion will be a continuation of Board Policy 8550, Unpaid Meals Policy. Or is it 8505 or 8550? I think it's 8550, yes, 8550. And I have a brief statement that I'd like to kick off our conversation with. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, the board will continue the discussion of the mandatory district policy 8550, unpaid meal charges, outstanding food services charges. We will discuss the clauses currently in the policy and will discuss recommendations for changes. It is the role of the board to discuss policies and any potential changes in a public forum. We welcome feedback and input from our community. Thank you to all who previously sent emails or made phone calls to share information with administration and the board. I'm sure many of you are here to speak on this issue tonight. I look forward to the board's discussion and as the board and administration work towards reaching a consensus about the policy's final form. It is important to know the history behind this policy. New Jersey State Statute 18A 33-21 specifies that the district must make 2 attempts to reach parents of students with lunch accounts in arrears within a 10-day period. If the parent or guardian has not made full payment by the end of this 10 school days, the statute directs that we contact the parent guardian again to provide notice that breakfast or lunch shall not be served to the student beginning 1 week from the date of the second notice unless the payment is made in full. An option was included in the policy guide to offer an alternative or basic lunch in lieu of not providing a meal. In addition, in 2017, the United States Department of Agriculture, also known as the USDA, directed districts that participate in the National School Lunch Program and the School Breakfast Program to have an unpaid meal policy in place for the 2017-2018 school year. The policy must explain how the food service program will handle situations where children eligible for reduced price meals do not have money to cover the cost of their meal at the time of service. The USDA has provided guidance that the policy should allow children to receive the nutrition they need to stay focused during the school day, minimize identification of children with insufficient funds, and maintain the financial integrity of the nonprofit school food service account. The USDA has indicated that while the specifics of the policy are at the district's discretion, the policy must be consistent with NJSA 18A 33-21. Therefore, the USDA requirements and those of the New Jersey state statute have been incorporated into Policy 8550. It is important to note that Cherry Hill children have not been denied food, regardless of current outstanding balances. The district's primary concern is always the welfare of the child. There are children families on the outstanding balance list who are in serious need and who would benefit from the free and reduced meal program. The district has made numerous attempts to convince these families to apply and will continue to do so. There are also children families on the outstanding balance list who may not qualify for the free and reduced meal program, but who would benefit from other social services and supports in the community. The district has and will continue to encourage families to seek out these supports and will help families connect with these supports. There are children and families on the outstanding balance list with the financial means and resources to address their child's needs, but who have chosen not to respond to inquiries from the district. It is the duty of the board and administration to balance compassion with financial responsibility. That is how we end up here tonight discussing this policy. The district has forgiven tens of thousands of dollars in outstanding meal balances over the past few years. Specifically, in 2017, $25,000 in lunch debt was erased. Fast forward to 2019, and the outstanding balance is back up to $18,000. Simply erasing the debt does not help those who need support and compassion. Simply erasing the debt does not address the many families with financial means who have chosen not to pay what is owed. The district has met with local and state officials about the impact of the New Jersey state statute and will continue to advocate for the students who are in need. And that brings us here tonight to discuss if and how our policy should be revised to address all of the mentioned scenarios. There are several specifics within the policy that the board should consider in its discussion tonight. Should we eliminate all debt for free and reduced lunch students? This will have a financial impact to the district. However, it would eliminate any current or future debt for our free students and minimize debt for reduced students. Should we change the dollar thresholds for first and second notifications? Should we change the dollar threshold for the alternate meal or no meal served? We should discuss what language we are or are not permitted by law to strike from the policy. We should discuss the ramifications, if any, of not fully implementing our existing policy. Should we eliminate the substitution of an alternative meal, for example, tuna or PB&J or cheese sandwich, and substitute the standard meal of the day? Should we restrict the charging of a la carte items if there are no funds on the account? Should we treat outstanding lunch debt as we do other obligations like overdue library books? While there is not a policy on this, the district does have a procedure to follow. Should we create a policy for this? We have a lot to discuss, so we should get right to it. As Dr. Malash and Mr. Goodwin outlined in their letter to the community last week, we have not denied food to our students, and we will continue to feed our students beginning on the first day of school. Lastly, as a board, we see tremendous value in public input and honor the feedback that is provided by community members. If there are members of the public that wish to comment on this policy, those comments can take place during the second public comment session after the board's action agenda. Thank you. I'll open the floor for discussion by the board. Mrs. Neary? I was going to go around the table.
So that really does go into a lot of detail. I'm still concerned. I think we absolutely have to address the thresholds regardless of what happens, because if state statute or federal statute mandates we have language that says that we don't serve a student while we've chosen not to follow that, that happens very quickly for a lot of students. It's not a problem solver, but I think it gives breathing room to the parents who may be working paycheck to paycheck, the ability to float those funds and still do what they need to do and the kids to eat. It doesn't solve the overall problem, but at minimum we can start there. I think $10 and $20 doesn't even take you through a full week. So I have a lot of concern around that. I also have concern around the language for mandatory reporter. If we want the families of the districts to trust us, to come to us, let us know if there's a concern and how we can work with them, I don't think that's a good place to start.
Just to touch on something you said, I would like to clarify with either Mrs. Sugars or Dr. Malash. The threshold is per child, not per family, as we currently refer to it, correct? Thank you, Mrs. Neary. Mrs. Stratton?
So I have the same concerns about the thresholds, and being very candid about being one of the parents that's been on that list before, and having left the last meeting and had to make sure I was not still on that list. So it does happen very quickly. I think that's a larger issue, though, in terms of the USDA and the thresholds that for free and reduced. I know that they're just they just don't meet the standards in terms of what is actually feasible and what can get away from you in terms of going paycheck to paycheck. So I would like us to take a look at those limits again. I'm also having a little bit of fear surrounding if we're contradicting ourselves in terms of what we require for mandated reporting and then what we are obligated to do. I understand that we need to follow our state policy and what is mandated by the state statute, but I think we also need to be aware of what precedents we might set in terms of we also have aftercare, we have other programs, and we don't want to be viewed as someone that's contributing to the insecurity or the neglect of any of our students. I think it's wonderful that we've found ways around it by having compassion regularly and not withholding any food from any students. But I think that we have to figure out what is the fine line between us following our guidelines, but also doing our best service to families and realizing and recognizing that we are going to need to stand in the gap at some point as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Matlack?
Thank you. I think Mrs. Stratton made a good point about, finding that balance, that fine line of compassion and our responsibility to our stakeholders. But we are dealing with children who we will continue to feed, but we need to make sure that our policy is being followed as we write it. And so we need to change our policy because right now we are not following it. And clearly those of us who have spoken are not comfortable with the way that is right now. So I've looked at, a few of the numbers, and our limits. So I'll throw it out there, some specifics. I think we should raise the initial notification to $25 when the parents are notified, and then at a minimum $60 at the upper level, and that I believe that the alternate should be the meal of the day for the student, and that I firmly believe we should continue to feed students and do as we are doing, looking into providing them all the help and services that they need if they qualify for any type of service. And if they don't, then what other services can we provide to those students to get them out of the situation that was brought to our attention regarding the lunch? That's all the notes that I have right now, and I just wanted to share those. Thank you.
Ms. Schultz?
So I think that most of us all agree that we want to continue to feed the children. I also think that we have to be financially responsible to the district as well. I think if we raise the limits to 50, to 90, to 100, I think we have to move the discussion to the problem. And it's a difficult conversation, but the problem is that we have three subsets. We have families that can pay that are not returning the district's phone call. So how are we going to solve that problem? We have families that would greatly, greatly benefit if they fill out the free and reduced lunch form. Filling out that form benefits the district by getting financial money back from Title I funds. How do we solve that problem of getting the families to fill out the free and reduced lunch form? We also have families that truly need the district service, whether that's by our guidance counselors, our psychiatrists on staff, whether that's our backpack foundation. We need those families to call us back so that we in the district can provide those families with all of the great services that our district has to provide. I don't think anybody on this panel or any of the members of our community are in support of not feeding children. But the policy and what we need to solve for is how do we get parents to call us back who can pay for their meals? How do we work with families who need to fill out that free and reduced lunch form? Because it's advantageous to them and their children, and it's advantageous to us as a district. And how do we support the families who truly are food insecure? Because we have programs in our district. And to me, that's what we need to be educating the community about. We do have lots and lots of programs in our district for those families. So that's the problem that I'd like to talk about and really start solving for. Because feeding the children is an obvious solution. But the hard solution that we need to talk about are all the three that I outlined.
Thank you, Mrs. Schultz. Mr. Avadia?
Thank you. I agree with much of what was said. I guess I'm last. But I think, where Mrs. Matlack talks about the meal of the day and, getting away from the tuna, given that there's no cost savings, I think that makes perfect sense. When we're talking about upping the threshold because food is expensive and these thresholds will be reached quickly, I don't know if $25 and $60 is the right, but I think it's in the right direction, and we could certainly consider in that world. I know in neighboring districts we've seen like $50 and $100, $25 and $50, somewhere in that range, but something that allows more leeway to see what root causes could be and to allow a few different contacts, a few different methods. Obviously, we don't want to deny children who we're asking to learn and perform and live out some of their best experiences to do so hungry. And no one here wants that or is suggesting that. I think as we connect to need, Aramark in the last session, mentioned that there are some barbecues. I think there are innovative ways to connect to people. The last I heard in Cherry Hill, there are 70 languages spoken, so we may need multiple methods, multiple out-of-the-box solutions to really develop relationships with families and connect them to, as Mr. Schultz says, there's a lot of great resources that are going underutilized or unutilized. I think based on public comment at our last session, there's a process at the building level that we're not totally sure is working. A few people talking about they owed money, they didn't know about it. And so really looking at a process map and how that's done case by case before things get out of hand, which they seem to do on an annual basis. If the problem is financial, I think we need to be open to the idea of donations. We accept PTA donations, we accept the Cherry Hill Education Foundation donations for technology. Technology is great. I'm a big supporter of technology, but it doesn't really come in comparison with trying. You can learn without technology. You can't learn nearly in the same capacity when you are hungry. There's some flexibility, and I think we should strive, given the good attention on this and intense attention on this, to get to a policy that lives up to what we actually do. If we can't do that, then the quo that has been status in terms of not following the policy does seem, but it seems like we have an opportunity to really fix this. I do really agree with, I think, Ms. Schultz, or maybe I just agree with myself, to say that there's a bigger issue here, and it's that Cherry Hill is a community in change and in greater need as the years wear on. We're thought of as a very, very affluent community, and that's true for some people in Cherry Hill, but it is less and less true as the years go on. We have half of our schools are Title I schools. Food insecurity is real, and if we're thinking that the children are hungry during the school day, what about the weekend? What about the evening? I appreciate that government in Cherry Hill has weighed in that these are concerns, but these aren't just school concerns. These are family and these are community concerns. School supplies and backpacks and the many things that may be stretching a Cherry Hill family, that's not something we can solve on our own in the schools. That's a whole community that comes together. When we looked last week, what we're not talking about is the very disparate outcomes in East and West performance. And that is a board priority. It's one of about 4 priorities that we have. It's not in a good state. It is not surprising to me that when we look at where the food problem is the highest, it is in our lesser performing of schools. And so we really need a bigger community conversation than the one that surrounds tuna. I think tuna is a great conversation to have, but I think it's much bigger. This takes place in other forums and in other places. When we talk about changing our district's fair funding designation that would lead to greater dollars, you have to understand there are a lot of people who don't want to do that. We don't want to recognize necessarily what Cherry Hill is. We want to think of a Cherry Hill of the 60s or 70s. And that's great, but in the middle of it are these kids and these families that need some level of support from us through a really honest conversation. And as we can resolve this one issue today and in the weeks to come, the other issue we can't. It will take a lot more digging deeper and really thinking about how do we support a community of phenomenal people that is increasingly diverse and increasingly in need. And we have some ability, if we face that truth, to really help and to do the things that the school district and government should do to, for everyone to realize that American dream. And I think that that's what's on the table. I think that's where we should get to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abadia. Mrs. Neary?
So while I agree we want to reach out to the parents and increase those who apply for free and reduced lunch, but I want to temper that with just how low the income thresholds are, and are there a lot of families that are outside of that? So for a family of 4, I think the free lunch, the household income is like roughly $46,000, and for reduced is I think something like $60,000. I'm quoting just from what I've read recently, but it's low, and I think there are a lot of families that fall outside of that, and I don't think it'll solve the problem, and we're not going to solve it here, which is why I suggest that we can put in some measures to provide breathing room while we work with our state legislators to apply pressures to change the state laws that currently state, don't serve kids after X number of what have you not met. That puts boards like us and others in a bind where you have to violate your own policy to ensure you're feeding kids. So ultimately, that responsibility lies with them. Fix the law, we'll continue to feed the kids, and get the families to have trust in us again, so they want to tell us, hey, I'm having a hard time, I'm floating it till next pay, can I have the breathing room? I don't think they trust us. And I think we can do things in the policy to help show them that they can trust us, that we're here to help them. We're not here to call DCPMP because you're having a hard time.
Thank you.
What does that look like? In your opinion, what does that look like, and where does the money come from? Why we wait for the state to fix the policy.
I agree with Ben. I don't think we should turn away donations. If people are willing to help, let them.
So just a fact, our local Cherry Hill Food Bank is still without a location, and as of 3 days ago, the local Cherry Hill Sun article, to date, they've only raised $11,000. So when the donations don't come in and the problems still exist and children are still in need, I don't think that our realistic problem should be to rely on donations. I'm not saying to turn them away, but it makes more sense to have people in the community willing to donate food and enhance our backpack program, so that as we're getting food and donations, we are sending home actual food to children in our district so that they can eat over the weekend and throughout the week.
I think that's a great idea. And if we have excess food, let's be innovative. If we have food that we're getting rid of in our cafeteria, package it and send it home to these families.
We currently are running our backpack program today with food, and we send backpacks home with children every Friday. So folks that are looking to donate certainly can donate to our backpack program, where we're sending home backpacks full of food to our children that are food insecure and our families. We're happy to take those donations. In my opinion, that to me is a better way to solve the problem. We're solving the problem and making sure that our children are eating over the weekend. Again, this is a difficult conversation. I'm not suggesting that it's not a difficult conversation, but we have to balance making sure we are feeding children and being financially responsible to all members of the district. I also want to put into perspective for everyone, our community is made up of senior citizens who are also on fixed incomes. We also have populations in the district of folks who do not have kids in the district, and they are footing the majority of the bill to send our children to school. We need to also keep all of those community members in mind. Nobody is suggesting that we're not feeding our children. We're looking for solutions. I don't think that it's practical to say, let the state change the policy while we continue to let the numbers grow out of control.
You have to do both. You have to do both
I'm
at
not
the same
suggesting that we
time.
don't either. I'm certainly not suggesting that we don't either. I also think that it's important to note that, as Ms. Sugars suggested at the last board meeting, our account, our lunch account is an enterprise account. So there are ramifications if that account goes negative, which would mean that the state would come in and the state would run an audit if that lunch account goes negative. So are we going to let the balance go so negative that we're now pulling from our general fund balance? And then what suffers there? Again, it is a difficult conversation. Not suggesting we don't feed the children at all, but I think we have to talk about real options for, again, families that can afford to pay, and again, families that we should be working with. Again, then we do have 70 language spoken, but the form comes in 40 plus languages for those families. There are ways for us to help with our guidance counselors and reaching out. I completely agree with you. If the process we have in place and the first call from the guidance counselor to the family is not working, let's revisit that. Because our students are with our guidance counselors, they're with our principals, they have a better relationship at that level, and we should be utilizing that and absolutely going back and revisiting why that connection or that touch point is not working.
Thank you, Mrs. Schultz. Mr. Avadia?
I think the question is, I mean, I tend to agree with Ms. Schultz about this isn't so much, there's a deeper relationship that needs to be forged here. But, one of the things about being on the board, being very new to the board, is we have to discuss these issues in public. We're discussing this issue as a discussion. That's what we did last time, to get some idea, and a proposal was brought and we talked about that. But the reality being, when this was brought up last session, the reason was financial. If the reason is financial that we're looking at the policy, we had a $3 million program, $200,000 to the good at the end of the year, and about 10% of that is owed. So 90% to the good is okay. I mean, there was really no reason, just from a purely financial perspective, to review the policy. We weren't following it. It wasn't perfect, but it worked in its own way. Once we put a microscope on the policy, I think it really uncovers a lot of other things. But it's not the financial is not the thing that was going to destroy the district. It's a $212 million budget. You know, $20,000 was going to be okay. So all this to say, there are huge underlying issues that we're not going to solve today at all, but that really, you know, this isn't about tuna, at least not for, I don't think, anyone on the board here. Thank you.
Any other board members? Students? Any comments? I don't want to put you on the spot. Okay. Dr. Malash or Mrs. Sugars?
We're all good.
Jack, right? Okay. Okay. Dr. Malash or Mrs. Sugars, anything to weigh in on?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Seidel. Actually, including as I do my superintendent's comments in a few minutes, we'll just include some perspective. I just am appreciative of the board members who are here, you know, for your candor and for your input, just process-wise. So, and just for you all and for our new board members and the folks that are here, next steps will be, so we will take the information that you all in the discussion put forward tonight, as well as the discussions that have gone on recently. And then when we come back in September, and we are committee of the whole again on Tuesday, September the 10th, we will have proposed revisions to the policy, you know, to be read for the first time during the month of September. So we'll have all of that, you know, for the board.
Okay, thank you. So next on the agenda, I will ask if we have any correspondence that board members would like to share. Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to turn it over to our student representatives. And I can't remember, I was not at the last meeting, so I don't know who started last time, but I am going to start with Jack from Cherry Hill High School West.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry for my little lateness. I thought this was in the library, and I shouldn't be late because I used to go to the school, so. But anyway, Cherry Hill West Community Report. So in athletic news, we've been having scrimmages the past couple of days, over the past 2 weeks. Boys and girls soccer have been scrimmaging, and both teams are looking good and are excited for the upcoming season. The girls field hockey team's been having scrimmages. They've been going all around, having a good time. They're doing good. The girls tennis and volleyball team have also had scrimmages, and they're doing good. Everyone's very excited for the upcoming season, and the new cross-country coach has the cross-country team working hard, so they're looking good too. And then from other news, the group called Peer Leaders just went on a retreat to Camp Akanikin, and that was a lot of fun. I was there myself, but besides that, they learned great leadership skills through like bonding with each other, and that's going to strengthen the West community. And then the past 2 days, the new freshman class coming in has been going to West for freshman orientation, and that continues tomorrow as well. And they're getting a sense for what the West community is like, and they're adapting to their new home, I'd say. So that's all that's going on at West. Thank you.
Thank you. Great report. Next up, we have Jacob from Cherry Hill High School East.
Hi, everybody. The same sports teams are starting practice and have continued practice throughout the past 2 weeks at East as have at West, and some practices and games have had to be canceled due to heat earlier in the summer, but no incidents and has been well managed by the coaches. The auditorium construction is ongoing and progressing as normal. The ETA is to be finished by the end of the school year, and transportation will be provided for dress rehearsal of the plays and musicals, so that is covered. Freshman orientation is today, and Dr. Perry said he's very excited for students to get into East and to see it for the first time, and he's very excited to get back into the daily schedule of things. It is the first year of Chinese 2 at Cherry Hill East. The same Chinese teacher we had was hired full-time this year, and there are 3 level 1 classes and 3 level 2 classes in the program for this upcoming school year. An update on the security vestibules. Construction will go on during the school year. It did not start during the summer. They have the company chosen and it is set to begin, but there's no issues with the entrances and exits during construction, and it will not be impacted. There will be one vestibule at the main entrance. There were a lot of people, a lot of staff entrances and exits. Miss Keely Kane retired. She was a math teacher, along with Dr. Ravone, who ran yearbook and was an English teacher. Mr. Weaver, as we all know, who was the play director, he retired. Mr. Brake, he was a West graduate. He was hired as an English teacher. Ms. Starbach was hired as an English teacher. Gambino replaces Mr. Weaver with Mr. Gagliardi overseeing the broadcasting department, a very important subject at Cherry Hill East. Mr. McVeigh is now a full-time special ed teacher. Ms. Sheehan is now a full-time nurse, in addition to, I forget her name. Ms. Tomasowski is now helping Mr. Seamus with math calc, and Mrs. Mel is replacing her math program for special education math. Akayari Young is replacing Ms. Keely Kane for math, and Maria Hahn is a new guidance counselor. She replaces Dr. Lynch, and Kevin Hillard is a long-term sub for Mrs. Pfeiffer in gym. An update on bathroom locking and turnstile system. Dr. Perry said he's keeping all bathrooms open during the full day, including during lunch breaks. This is a better situation for students and a more productive work environment, especially as many people take tests on the 3rd floor and during lab, and they cannot get to an easy access bathroom, but that will be changed this year. A security officer will be dedicated to watching the security cameras for the bathrooms all day long, and they require all students when leaving classrooms to turnstile on a computer, either a desktop or a laptop, to turnstile in and out, so to sign in, so Cherry Hill East knows where you are during your school day. Every classroom will have a turnstile open on one of the computers, and that data set is recorded, so if parents want to know where their student is, everyone is aware. Google Calendar update. Every teacher is expected to maintain a Google Calendar accessible from Genesis course pages, and parents do need to get in via the student's username and password. The district was not able to find a way to guarantee parent access separate from students. The difference from last year is that now Google Classroom is the baseline for all student work and assignments. Last year it was simply a link needed to be had in Google Classroom. There is now an expectation for giving back assessments, all assessments other than district assessments. Every department has its own grading policy, so that's standardized, and it's all weighted grading, so it's not a points-based system, but a weighted grading system. And there's an online class change where classes will be scheduled according to graduation requirements. If students do not complete the online required class before graduation, or in terms of the schedule and how many assignments, how many classes they have to take in a certain subject, it will be put on their course selection until they complete their online assignment. That is all.
Thank you, Jacob. Next, we're going to move into our first public comment session. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. The first public comment session is for agenda items only. There will be another public comment section for any topic at the end of the meeting. If we have any students in the audience, students will be given the first opportunity to speak. Please speak into the microphone and clearly state your name and address. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. Well, it says the timer light, but I believe we have paddles. Oh, we do. We have the timer. So I can read this side. The timer on the screen behind me will indicate the amount of time you have remaining. And just as a point of order, just as a reminder, Cherry Hill is a community that values education. Issues that affect our children, schools, and community bring out strong emotions in all of us. The Board of Education takes seriously its vision to work with civility. Please join the board in sending a message to our students that even the most difficult issues can be addressed while showing respect for one another. And with that, I'll open it up for the first public session. Please be sure to state the item on the agenda that you are speaking on.
Steve Robbins, 103 Charland Circle, and I am speaking about actually 3 items on the agenda, 2 of which are actually comments about what's not on the agenda, which is there are no items listed for P&L or strategic planning, which is disappointing. I noticed on the board calendar that there have not been committee meetings since June, and there won't be another one till October. That is an incredibly long time to go without committee meetings. A lot of what's the discussion happening tonight belonged in a P&L committee meeting with stakeholders, subject matter experts, and not in front of the board. I think a lot of the chaos that we're seeing tonight and a lot of the misinformation we've seen in the press, especially the press, could have been avoided if this information had been discussed first in committee. We could have been properly vetted and avoided a lot of the misunderstanding that went out the past couple of weeks between the work session and tonight. So I understand the calendar is what the calendar is, and there are going to be no committee meetings until October. But the school lunch issue is important and it needs to be discussed. But I think you'll serve yourselves well to do it in committee. And to the folks in attendance, please, I hope you will go to committee meetings. That's where the real discussion usually takes place, where it should take place. It's where you will get the true information. You should not rely on the press. The amount of misinformation that I read the last 2 weeks has just been astounding. There were 4 former board members in the audience that I counted. There might even be more if I didn't see everybody. We know when we see these things, we know what's really going on. But the rest of the public, you folks, you couldn't possibly know what was nonsense and what was real. Please, we begged, when I was on the board, we begged folks to come to committee. I'm glad to see everybody here. Please go to committee meetings. You'll get your best information and have the most ability to put meaningful input into what goes on. The third item I have was actually a question I noticed in C&I. Item 4 is in bold, meaning it's new and was not discussed in work session. The readoption of the curriculum. Is that just the standard readoption that's done every year? And if that's the case, why is it a last-minute addition? Why wouldn't this also been flagged from before? I just wanted to make sure there's nothing new or interesting that was coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. Anyone else?
Good evening, it's Rick Short, 1002 Chelton Parkway. I'm commenting on page 13 of fencing. Looks to me like we're spending $669,000 in fencing. Fencing can just keep people out, but security cameras for $1.9 million could do a lot better. I feel that investing in this fence was not the best way to go. You should have invested in security cameras, films, and other items for the schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Anyone else for the first public comment? Okay. Next, I'll turn it over to Dr. Malash for the superintendent's comments.
Thank you, Mrs. Seidel. So this is my favorite time of year. As we're getting ready for school to open, 2 weeks from today, we will have completed our first full day of school. During the course of the last week or so, we welcomed about 90 new staff members into the district. Some of these are folks who started during the 2018-2019 academic year, and the rest are folks that were hired between this spring and into this summer. And those folks spent 4 full days, Wednesday and Thursday of last week and Monday and Tuesday of this week, getting ready. Because honestly, working in Cherry Hill is unlike working anyplace else. So for folks that have moved from other districts or folks that have just graduated from college, we have the opportunity to spend time with them so they get an idea about what does it mean, what are the expectations to be an educator and to truly impact the lives of the children that they're going to come in contact with each and every day. One of the things when I spoke to them, and I had an opportunity to speak with them each of the days that they were here for the training, was this morning as we finished up. And when I had the chance to talk to them, I told them that there is going to be expectation every single day. That my expectation for them as superintendent of schools is that they are at their best every day they're in the classroom. Because each of our children, they literally have basically one experience. They have one chance to be in 2nd grade or one chance to be in 7th grade or to be a sophomore in high school. And our teachers on a regular basis, the team that they are joining here, the folks that day in and day out give their best to our kids, they need to see that, especially in the new staff that are here. Our kids need that, and they deserve that. Administratively, we expect it. Our parents expect it, and the parents send us the most important thing that they have, the most important part of their lives. And I told the new staff that we truly are blessed in what we do because we have the opportunity to have the children in our schools on a daily basis. So I'm looking forward to those folks starting. Everybody returns on Thursday, all of the staff members, all of the educational assistants. So the folks that have been on summer break all return this Thursday. So it'll be very exciting in each of our schools. Again, I'm looking forward to being out and about in the buildings and welcoming people back. Our students begin next Tuesday, September the 3rd. We will welcome right around 11,000 students back into our district. And again, the most diverse group of students that we have ever had. Cherry Hill has continued to change. Folks have spoken about it tonight, and right now it's a little more than 72. I think it's at 73 specific and identifiable languages that are spoken in our homes. 73 languages. I challenge anybody to go home when you sit down tonight at the kitchen table, see how many languages you can list. I can do a pretty good list of the languages that are here. I can't even approach 50 at this point. That's a lot of languages that are out there. And on a daily basis, these children join one another in our classrooms, again, with our incredibly dedicated staff, and they learn and they produce. So very excited about the kids being back. September 3rd is also our first official day with full-day kindergarten. Full-day kindergarten, right? Yes. For those of you that have been in town for more than a few years, or even if you've only been here for a few years, the discussion about full-day kindergarten has gone on formally for decades. In 1997, the Elementary Redesign Committee made 2 recommendations to the district, 2 recommendations. One of them was to move the 6th graders out of the elementary schools, and the other was to implement full-day kindergarten in our district. So finally, 22 years later, we have full-day kindergarten will begin next Tuesday. We hired 18 staff members just for full-day kindergarten during the course of this spring and summer. Incredibly excited about them starting and about the impact that full-day kindergarten is going to have on our community and on our school district. Not only do I believe the kids will have an incredible experience in kindergarten and will learn and grow and develop, but I'm excited to see what does it look like in 1st grade and 2nd grade and 3rd grade. What's the difference with this cohort when they move on into the middle school and into high school? Very exciting. And again, a credit to the board and to the community through the work and the discussion, because it was the board made the determination in October of 2017 to make the commitment that in September of 2019 that full-day kindergarten would be put forward. So in less than 2 full years since that decision was made, this program has been built. There was an incredible committee that met during the course of the last 18 months, made up of community members and staff members that Dr. Mahan and her team organized and ran. Very excited. So look for additional pictures and information. We'll continue to have stuff out about that during the course of the next week. Just some other structural things that have gone on, literally structural things, some structural improvements that have taken place in the district during the course of the summer. Kilmer Elementary School, which we used as a model for the building refurbishment work that we would like to continue to do, is absolutely beautiful inside. I know Dr. Rickensrud, we had all the administrators head down there last week. He welcomed all of them in to do a tour, to see the building, new floors, new ceilings, new paint, new furniture. The all-purpose room was redone. Looks absolutely stunning. At some point as we move into the fall, we'll also do an event where we'll have the board and community members so they can see what's taken place. Not only was Kilmer done, but the majority of Horace Mann on the inside, not all the classrooms, but in the hallways were painted. The metalwork was painted. New lights were installed. Over at High School West, much of the front hallways were repainted as well. Roofs were put on at the Jones Gym at High School West and parts of Horace Mann. There's continuous work that has gone through. You've seen an incredible amount of landscaping that has gone on. Throughout our community and throughout this area, the way the weather has been during the course of the summer, there are a lot of mature trees. And in many communities and in our neighborhoods, we've lost trees. One of the things as we look in terms of the safety and the security of the buildings and the property is pruning those trees. Things have to be pruned in order to grow and in order to be healthy. So a lot of work has gone on, not just in the buildings, but also on the grounds and that kind of stuff as well. So very appreciative. If you're out and about and you see our cleaners, our custodians, our building guys, our maintenance guys, please make sure that you thank those men and women. I had the opportunity to speak with them the other day. Aramark hosted a luncheon for them and give the opportunity to thank them on behalf of all of the families and of the community and all the children who will start school next week. Because if those folks did not do their job with the pride in which they do it, we could not open school. We couldn't put our children, we couldn't put our staff members in our building to learn. So please, all of you, the folks that are here, the folks that are watching, if this is on video, when you see one of our custodians or cleaners or one of the maintenance guys, thank them. Thank the ladies that do the work. Thank them for what they do, for the pride they put into the job that they have. There will be ongoing discussion about lunch. I appreciate the discussion. Again, I believe it's a courageous conversation for the board to have. The way that our structure went during the course of the summer, we did have committee of the whole. So we've had committee of the whole in July for a number of years, when we first put the second board meeting back in. This year we had committee of the whole in August, honestly because we were in transition with board members and board members being seated, where we started the August work session, the committee of the whole meeting with 5 board members. So we were unable to do committee meetings, and again, board members, you recall that as we go into the fall. But again, a courageous conversation for the board to have, because we're in a situation where we realize that there are things in the policy that need to be redone, right? That we need to work on, we need to talk about, and to have the discussion as a board and as a community about what is it that we can do and how do we possibly move forward. There are state requirements, right? There are federal laws, there are state laws that we are called upon, that you as board members, when you swear your oath, that you say you're going to uphold. Right? That's one piece, and that is way far removed. And you've seen some of the legislators and you've seen some people that have been elected that have come out and talk about, don't worry about the laws, don't worry about the statutes. Well, we have to worry about it, right? That's part of our responsibility. We do. The most important thing that we have to worry about, honestly, is the kids need to eat. Children need to eat. They have to eat. We know that the kids that eat regular and healthy meals, they grow, they mature, they learn, they become successful children, successful young adults, and ultimately successful adults. It's one of the reasons when we changed the high school schedule 10 years ago, 9 years ago, whatever it was now, that we put lunch in. Because many of you remember that we had a straight 8-period schedule at the high school, and about 14 to 18% of our children did not take lunch. It is not healthy for children not to eat lunch. Doesn't matter if they're in the elementary school or the high school. So it's one of the reasons when the high school schedule was changed all those years ago, the district made that commitment because there was a commitment to doing that. Still holds true today. Kids have to eat. And we have to balance that responsibility with compassion about what does it look like to make sure that the children are eating. People have contacted us. I met with people today that have offered to donate money. And I'm incredibly grateful that there are folks out there and there are folks with those means to be willing and able to make a donation to the school district. Do I want them to make a donation to cover the $14,000 or the $18,000? I don't. I really don't. If they're going to make a donation, as some of you all talked about, we started last year a Friday food backpack program through a generous grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that one of our high school nurses put in for and was awarded, we as a district awarded, and it's a program that is run by students and staff members in the district. So at a number of our schools every Friday, starting last spring, these backpacks were delivered. And indiscriminately, or not in an obvious way, the backpacks were given to children who took them home. Returned the backpacks on Monday, they were sent back over, and they were filled and done again on Friday. If folks want to donate money, donate to that program. I would love to expand that program. We have a real issue in town, and Mr. Avadi had talked about this, with the reality of the families who are here. There's a real issue. There are families who are food insecure. There are. That's Cherry Hill. That's Cherry Hill right now. And it wasn't Cherry Hill 40 years ago throughout town. But that's real. And it's on both sides of town, and it's in each one of our schools. I would love to expand that program. So if folks want to make donations, let us know. Reach out to us. Contact us. If you don't want to make a donation to the school district, make a donation. Work with the Cherry Hill Food Pantry. Again, our families and our children respond and benefit directly from the work that the men and women who volunteer for the Cherry Hill Food Pantry with what they do all the time. And the kids benefit in the fall and in the summer and in the winter and the spring because hunger doesn't end. It doesn't end, and it doesn't stop. Kids have to eat. The issue on the list, and I have the list with me. I've gone through the list. I can't tell you how many times during the course of the last couple of months, right, of children who owe money. There are absolutely children on that list who are in financial need, that we know that there are issues, that they need our support. Wiping out the debt, merely paying the money that that family owes, does not help those children because we've been feeding the kids and we're going to continue to feed the kids. We are. Wiping it away does not fix the problem because those children are still not receiving the lunch and the meals that they should be based on the list that's there. They're not receiving the additional support that they could in school. We as a district are not receiving the support that's guaranteed to us by the federal government based on the roles and the rosters of the kids that are on the free and reduced meal program, and not to mention the additional social services that are available in Cherry Hill and in Camden County. And that's concerning. My biggest concern overall is that we are not reaching those families. A lot of folks out there have made a lot of suggestions, and I appreciate the suggestions. I'm always willing to listen. I like when people come out to meetings. You all know that. But we have to find a way in the communities, because again, there's going to be concern. Some folks are not going to want to come talk to me about it, but they may talk to one of you all. They may talk to you as board members, or you as community members, or you as people who are involved civically in things that go on. There are ways that we need to work together to support them. There's a system that is set up that will benefit these children and these families. The other part as I go through this list, the frustrating part, is there are absolutely children and families of means on this list that have literally told us that they are not going to pay. Not that we're guessing they're not going to pay, that have told us they're not going to pay. And some in no uncertain terms when they've spoken to secretaries. And God bless them, because the secretaries who have made calls or received the calls that do the work, they don't make any decisions. They don't write the policies. They don't enforce the policies. They merely are the messenger. And they've received some incredibly inappropriate messages from folks. One of the other things that I'll tell you, since the discussion happened 2 weeks ago, we've taken in a little more than $3,000 has been made good on the list. A little more than $3,000 that families have sent in during the course of the last couple of weeks. The problem on the list is not kids who are identified as free and reduced lunch. That is not the majority of kids that appear on this list. It's not. So we need to work together. We have to work together. I believe that there is a place and a reason for civil discourse. And there's 2 words that are included there, civil and discourse. I'm not going to go through definitions. We've done that in the past. We have to be able to talk about it. We got to be able to talk about it as a community, and we have to do better, all of us, for our kids. All of us have to do better. So we will continue to move forward. It's not easy discussions, and it's not a simple problem. It is a complex issue, as are most issues when you're talking about things that benefit children. It's also incredibly emotional, no doubt about it. And I will tell you, as a high school principal, I would make lunches. I would make bagged lunches and bring them in. There was one child one year, literally every day of school, I made her lunch. I packed my 4 girls' lunches. I packed her lunch every single day. And I would tell you, by and large, knowing the teachers and being in buildings and talking to them and seeing them, the majority of our teachers, the majority of our staff members, secretaries, educational assistants have food that they share. That exists. That's real. So I was going to have short comments tonight, Mrs. Seidel. I apologize. I get wound up, right? I can hear my own voice on the microphone. It's fantastic. So anyway, so the discussion will continue. There's no action, as the board talked about, there's no action for the board to take tonight. But the discussion will continue in September. It will. And we will make revisions. I'm sure there will be revisions. Again, as I said before, based on the information that you all have talked about and what you have suggested in the past, we will bring together and have a suggested revised policy when we meet again in September. And when September 3rd comes, we will continue to feed the children. We will continue to feed the children. Thank you, Mrs. Seidel.
Thank you, Dr. Malash. Now we will move into our action agenda, and first up, I will ask Mrs. Matlack to move our curriculum and instruction agenda. Mrs. Matlack?
Thank you very much. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, approval of out-of-district student placements for the 2019-2020 school year. Number 2, approval of services contract with the New Jersey Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired 2019-2020. Number 3, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2019-2020 school year. Number 4, approval of readopting curriculum. Number 5, approval of nursing standing orders for the 2019-2020 school year. And number 6, approval of special education settlement agreement. Do I have a second? Mrs. Schultz, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Matlack,
Yes.
Mrs. Neary,
Yes.
Mr. Avadia,
Yes, but yes to all, but with item 3, abstain where my name appears in section B.
Mrs. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Schultz,
Yes to all.
Mrs. Stratton.
Yes to all except item 3, where I abstain, or my name is listed as well.
Okay, thank you. Next, I will ask Mrs. Schultz to move the business and facilities agenda.
The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, financial reports. Number 2, resolution for the award of bids. Number 3, first reading of policy. Number 4, resolution for the award of contract renewal. Number 5, resolution for the award of transportation. Number 6, resolution for the award of change orders. And number 7, approval of non-public school security and technology plans. Do I have a second? Mrs. Matlack, are there any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars?
Mrs. Schultz?
Yes to all.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes.
Mrs. Neary?
Yes.
Mr. Avadia?
Yes to all.
Mrs. Seidel?
I need to abstain with respect to CDW on the bill list. Yes to the remainder.
Mrs. Stratton?
Yes.
Okay, in Mrs. Tong's absence, I'm going to move the HR agenda. The superintendent recommends and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated. Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, leaves of absence certificated. Number 6, leaves of absence non-certificated. Number 7, other compensation certificated. And you have a pink sheet in front of you with additions to 2, 3, 4, 7, and a new item number 8, assignment salary change non-certificated. Do I have a second? Mrs. Neary. Any questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Mrs. Seidel?
Yes to all.
Mrs. Matlack?
Yes.
Mrs. Neary?
Yes.
Mr. Avadia?
Yes to all.
Mrs. Schultz?
Yes to all.
Mrs. Stratton?
Yes.
We do not have any items on the agenda tonight for policy and legislation or strategic planning. So we will move into our second public comment. This is the second public comment section on any item. If you would like to speak now, please speak into the microphone and clearly state your name and address. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. The timer on the screen behind me will indicate the amount of time you have remaining. And again, I'll state that if there are any students in the audience that would like to speak, we would like to allow them to go first.
My name is Oliver Adler, 61 Cameo Drive. Good evening, board members and Dr. Malash. My name is Oliver Adler. I am the student body president at Cherry Hill East for the 2019-2020 school year. I come to you tonight on behalf of East student government. We are horrified at what has come to be known as the tuna fish proposal. We are encouraged that the board has rejected to intentionally serve students a meal that the board knows students will not want to eat. Tuna does not provide significantly more nutrients than peanut butter and jelly, which many students would gladly eat. There is also a nominal cost difference between tuna fish and PB&J. Therefore, this is simply a matter of punishing students for their inability or the inabilities of their parents to pay for food. The punishment extends beyond the food itself as well. The easily recognizable tuna fish sandwich will become a badge of shame. What the board may fail to recognize is that school cafeterias are not always friendly places, and students will be stigmatized because of the food they carry. With the possible implementation of this policy, the board may be forcing students to choose between an already undesirable food option and all of the shame that comes with it, or hunger. We do understand the board's concerns about parents who are eligible based on their income status to sign up for free or reduced meal plans not doing so. But there may be considerations beyond simply a parent's financial state when thinking about signing up for free or reduced meal options, like, among other things, documentation status. While we applaud the board's efforts to discuss these options with people in their native language, it is important to understand that not language barriers, but fear, particularly in this government climate, may be the issue. For parents who can afford to pay and do not, there has to be a more private penalty rather than public shaming. We ask that instead of adopting this policy, the board looks at other paths to take. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oliver.
Ava Friedel, 9 Gately Court. Good evening. My name is Ava Friedel. I'm starting 9th grade at West. I would like to share my opinion on the lunch debate. I understand that if parents don't pay, the bill cost adds up. But have you considered that maybe a family is living paycheck to paycheck and can't afford it, or maybe they have fallen on tough times? Whatever the situation, don't take it out on the kids for something the parents have done.
Thank you, Ava.
Good evening. Jen Nadio, 224 North Madison Avenue. To begin, I want to thank Cherry Hill Township, Cherry Hill District, Cherry Hill Board of Education for stepping up and helping Cooper School become an ADA accessible school beginning September 3rd for one of our very important students in our district. We have a lot to do in this district with ADA accessibility, and that was really pushed by in the report on August 13th. There wasn't a lot of specifics out there. I really believe we have a lot more work to be done, and the reports should be longer and more detailed so the community understands how many buildings and playgrounds are not accessible to students and employees of this district. We need to do better. I actually watched the meeting on August 13th on vacation in a hotel in New Hampshire because many topics affect the teachers and students with special needs in this district. These are my takeaways. We have the greatest teachers ever. To hear Mrs. Sugar say we love our teachers, but they are messy, really upset me. And I would implore the district to find innovative ways to communicate changes in a nicer, kinder way. The rolling carts are for efficiency, not to clean up messy teachers. There are many families whose children are twice exceptional, meaning that they have different abilities, maybe dyslexia, maybe central auditory processing disorder, and at the same time they have a very high level intelligence. These students require in-class resources, and at the middle and high school levels, you are not allowed to have in-class resource in honors or AP. There could be some of your issue with discrepancy levels. Many of those students are in a level because they need the additional assistance. I know this for a fact because one of my own sons, who can't join honors or AP because he requires ICR, he's not allowed. So we need change. I vote for the lunch policy to go back to P&L now and be reviewed. I can imagine the number of students with special needs whose parents may not pay because of the cost and they can't concentrate the rest of the day. What happens if they have behaviors like my other son, who has behaviors when he's hungry? Then do we call the police? What do we do with these hungry students? So I think we should go back to P&L and discuss this. There also could be families in our district with financial issues due to paying for other services to teach their special ed students outside of school, and they are above the amounts for free and reduced lunches. So I just wanted to share my ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Nadia.
Jennifer Brumbaugh, 1758 T Rose Lane, and I just have a couple random questions and thoughts about the whole lunch issue. It seems clear to me there are 3 subsets of groups, so perhaps that needs to be addressed in a rewrite of the policy and how we handle each of those 3 specific groups. But I think it's critically important to know what percentage each of those groups makes up. You know, it makes me kind of livid to think about people of means just saying they're not going to pay. I find that absolutely unacceptable. But it's important to know, is that 2 or 3 families? Or are we talking about 30 families? We need to put some numbers to this, to having meaningful discussion. The other, I emailed you, Dr. Malash, about taking those sorts of situations to a credit agency. And I understand that we're in an arrangement with Aramark, and it's a profit-making program. So what responsibility or role can Aramark play in helping recoup costs from that particular subset? And then at what point are we going to say this is an exercise in diminishing returns? I mean, there are some people that don't want to be reached for whatever reason. What percentage are we willing to write off and just say we did our best? You know, we made a $200,000 profit. Are we willing to write off 5% of that? Are we willing to take donations to offset 5% of that or 10% of that? Because we have such huge, pressing concerns. I don't want to see districts spend so much time. We've got buildings that are crumbling. We're still underfunded. We're looking down the barrel at deadlines for Bond 2.0, and we haven't heard an update on that. So I agree. I'd like to see this go back to committee with some data. What are these numbers we're looking at for the parents that are on that list? I think you misspoke and you said, we have these kids who owe money. No, it's the parents who owe money. And I'm encouraged to hear everybody say, in the meantime, let's feed these kids. And my final point is I've had some lengthy, interesting discussions with many second grade girls. They all know what the tuna fish sandwich means. So keep that in mind, you know. It might be effective, but they all know what it means and they all talk about it. So when you're talking about the state policy of providing food for kids but not kind of identifying their financial situation, that's not the reality. Everybody knows the tuna fish sandwich means your parents haven't paid their bill. Please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brombaugh.
My name is Jeff Podowitz. I live in 1210 Cooper Drive, Cherry Hill, New Jersey. In 1989, 1990, we received $20.5 million in formula aid. That was dropped the following year by $5.4 million, and it has never, ever reached that amount for 30 years. State aid in Cherry Hill for 2008-2009 was about $16.5 million. In 2009-2010, it was again $16.5 million. Average per pupil, about $1,488. It was a much more economically diverse district. For comparison, the Lenape Regional School District in 2008-2009 received $30.9 million. In 2010, they received about $4,000 per pupil. We received $1,488, and they received $4,000. The following year, 2010, 2011, they and others were cut. They were cut 20% or $6.4 million. They received $24.5 million. They received about $3,200 per pupil. They were cut. You can consider that a disgrace. Cherry Hill, same year. We were cut $8.5 million. We were cut 51.9%. We received approximately $720 a student. They received $3,200. That was disgraceful. We received $720. And it has a cumulative effect. Now, we receive $18.4 million. Again, much more economically diverse than back in 2008 and 2009. That comes out to about approximately $1,700 a pupil, or $300 more per pupil than we received 10 years ago. We were behind the eight ball back in 2009, 2010 when we received $1,488. Now it's even worse. I think there's a big problem with the state in Cherry Hill. They're not going to give us any aid, it looks like. We have not received an increase. We're getting less aid than we did 30 years ago, and our representatives need to do something about that.
Thank you, Mr. Podowitz.
Matthew Bryn, 1924 Pippin Circle. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I really appreciated the verbal commitment from each and every one of you to make sure that all of the kids in Cherry Hill schools are fed, so thank you for that. But I did come here tonight to highlight some of the potential dangers of enforcing the policy that is still in words on the books about school lunches. So I understand that this issue is really difficult. Having hundreds of students in arrears for tens of thousands of dollars is a burden on the district's finances. That's true. And like Dr. Malosh said, tracking down parents to sign forms or to make payments can be an absolute nightmare, especially when they don't want to be found. But taking away school lunch from a hungry kid is definitely not the answer. A study by the American Youth Policy Forum found that food security plays a vital role in child cognitive development and in their ability to perform in school. Children who are food insecure have difficulty focusing on coursework and are more disruptive in class. They get lower scores on math and reading assessments. They are more likely to be suspended from school for misbehavior. They are more likely to develop anxiety and depression, and they are much less likely to graduate from high school. So this problem has a ripple effect throughout the entire course of their lives. And it breaks my heart that some students don't step up for their kids and pay down their school lunch debt. That's a terrible thing. But I would never, not once ever, choose to withhold food from a child or publicly shame them with an alternate meal choice because their parents could not or would not pay. If we cannot find a way to compassionately feed our students, which is dollar for dollar perhaps the least expensive way to improve academic outcomes, and like it or not, we as a school district are in charge of 75% of the tax revenue that comes into Cherry Hill. I hope that you consider a different approach to solving this problem, one where our children don't have to go hungry, where we can retain a reputation as a top quality school district because this affects our reputation permanently, and one where we can wake up in the morning and be proud of how we treat the least fortunate among us. So we depend upon the Cherry Hill School District to attract young families to our town. The future prosperity of our town is literally in each of your hands. Please make the right choice and change this policy permanently. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brin.
Steve Robbins, 103 Starland Circle. To all the reporters in the room tonight, TV cameras, press, I hope tomorrow's headline will be Cherry Hill School District has not, does not, and will not deny children a lunch meal. Let's get that straight once and for all. Thank you. Mr. Ovadia, with all due respect, as I said, there were 4 former board members in the audience. This is not a new problem. This is a problem we've been working on for decades. And it's not going to be solved by anyone in this room, frankly. This is why I really do commend that you go back to committee, invite folks from outside, because this is a community problem. The real issue financially is parents who choose not to pay, not because they can't pay. The amount of debt is a rounding error. Let's be real. And there are ways to make parents who can pay. Ding their credit reports, sue them in small claims court. We know who they are. It's not a difficult problem. The real problem, as has been identified tonight, is the families who struggle, who do not self-identify. And I don't think it's been mentioned here tonight, there's current talk in Washington of penalizing legal aliens who don't have their green cards, penalizing them in trying to get their green cards if they use federal services, which would include free and reduced lunch. So families who are here legally, could be punished for seeking free and reduced lunches if they are trying to seek a green card. That's something that needs to be addressed, and it is a problem I know that you guys in this room are not equipped to handle. It's unfair. But that doesn't mean you can ignore the problem, of course, and this is why I commend going back to committee, inviting township folks, county folks, state folks. It really does, this is going to have to be a holistic solution with all members involved. Seeking donations is a great way to start, but again, if people don't identify as a need, it's still problematic. And again, so it's a problem we're not going to solve in one night. You're not going to solve it in 2 nights. And I hope that you take the time, invite members of the community in as often, as frequently as you can, but most importantly, repeat after me, kids will be fed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins.
Good afternoon, Rick Short, 1002 Chelton Parkway. I see this totally different. This is a ridiculous topic, just as Council President of Cherry Hill said. This is a ridiculous topic. Ben, you forgot to mention that you also get $1.5 million more on average in state aid every year. We also every year get get a percentage cap of another 2.5. So that's $4 million. So of this $14,000 problem that we're trying to micromanage down to the exact cent to collect everything, we are wasting so much of our resources of people and everything else worrying about this $14,000. This is ridiculous. I mean, budget-wise, the entire budget, it's .00514, and I cannot believe this board sits here and tries to collect down to the exact cent. It is micromanaging at its worst. It is a disgrace. We have so many other sources to get funds. We have donations. We have PTA people that would probably volunteer. There are so many other solutions than trying to collect down to the exact cent. It is ridiculous. And what you should be worried about right now, and I'm glad these cameras are here to tell you, you have $1.9 million right now in bank cap, and you have $1.9 million that you need for security. This is ridiculous. Now let's review all the mistakes. First of all, you picked out the wrong school to do a test pilot at. Why did you pick out Barkley when you could have picked out a larger school? That's what experts say. Why did you spend $1,069,000 on 2 schools when you could have done all 16 schools? Why did you miss the magnetic locks on doors? Why did you miss the vestibule items? Why in 2019 did you not put 1 cent until I came in front of this board? This is outrageous that we have no security and we're worried about tuna fish sandwiches in Cherry Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Short.
Rich Bowen, good evening, everybody. I live at 13 Webster Avenue in the Earlton section. The first thing I want to say is the young man from West stole my thunder. The first thing I was going to say was I also went to school here. It's been a long time, but I went to school here. As many of you probably know, some of you may not know, I wrote an op-ed that actually got published in NewJersey.com a day or two ago, calling out the state and the federal government for food shaming, endorsing food shaming by their policies. I do want to say tonight, I was glad to hear Ms. Neary say there's a problem with the state statute. I agree, and it's good to hear. And to me, unless I'm otherwise have not heard, it's the first time I've heard the board say that. And one of the things I'd like to offer is when you are writing that policy, I think you need to say that in that policy, that you're writing this policy based on state statutes, but the statute is wrong, and the USDA is wrong, because it's food shaming. And as everybody else in this room has said, we're not going to not feed children, no matter what. I think we need to get back to, and a lot of people have said this, I agree with you, Mr. Avadia, this issue is not about financial responsibility. It's chump change. It's $14,000, it's $18,000, it's $20,000. It's a $211 million budget. I know you have obstinate parents. I can only tell you, in my life in business, we run into that all the time. You're going to get a certain amount of people that just aren't going to pay. In the private sector, what do? We have a number of things it means. We get a collection agency. We attach wages. I don't know what, I can't tell you that I have a solution, but I think you should consider all of them. A collection agency, surcharge on the tax return. There are other things you can do that the state statutes do not prevent you from doing. I think you just have to figure that out, decide how to do it, and realize that there are going to be, you're not going to collect 100%. No one ever does. In private industry, in government, or in nonprofit, it just doesn't happen. The last thing I want to say is, I don't think the issue is going away. Based on the op-ed I wrote, I actually got a call from NBC News this afternoon wanting to interview me. I declined mostly because my position in the next election, I just felt the optics were bad. I felt I wasn't independent and told them no, I would not interview, but I know they were calling other parents and they did interview other parents. So the reason I bring that up is because I think this may be an opportunity. I'm a big believer that the state statutes are wrong, the USDA is wrong. I think this is a great opportunity for the Cherry Hill Board and Cherry Hill in general to say, look, this is unintentional consequences, and we disagree. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowen.
Rosie Arroyo, 105 Forest Road. Hi, everyone. I just want to say it is a privilege to be just able to come up here and have a conversation with each of you. Just I'm sure, like you feel, that it's a privilege to sit on the board. But also looking at the privilege that some of you have in stating what we need them to do, what they need to do, and them and they being community. Now, I am a local community leader, and I do engage community often. And one of the things that I do is spend a lot of time with families in their homes, understanding what are the situations they're going through, taking that to the stakeholder table, creating policies, changing laws, and then coming back with practices that are evidence-based and actually work and prove positive outcomes. So I do believe in what Ms. Neary said, and I fully support that we have to come up with multifaceted approaches when we're dealing with any type of policy or issue. But it isn't a we-them thing, and presenting things that way might disengage community even more, specifically those that are of that part that speaks other languages that we were talked about earlier today. That's also believing that some of these folks, some of our families, some of my neighbors, some of your neighbors, actually read and write in their own language, right? We have a lot of first-generation community members here, second generation, and it's not as always easy to be able to interpret documentation to fill out these things. Which brings me to the fact that we need more outreach in our communities. Other school districts have created outreach services that actually have departments in their districts that have family engagement and outreach services that literally sole job is to engage parents, help them with all the resources available in their community. And that has supported in getting ties into services that are actually local and supportive and sustainable. Also, there are several local and state and federal grant opportunities that come up every year. And I'd like to have the opportunity to utilize our community members to support in some of that grant writing efforts. There's a lot of data discussions locally, your County Health and Human Services Department, your Camden County Youth Services Commission. They're all well aware of what youth services are. The County Council on Young Children is also another available resource that can help you access information on local opportunities for families. And lastly, I'd like to ask the school district and the board to take a look at their school clearance policy. Several youth are being sent to crisis screening centers, and we just need to develop a clearer understanding of what the school clearance and what the crisis centers are. And I'm hoping that they return the request to be available at the next meeting to discuss the school clearance policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Arroyo.
Good evening, Kim Friedel, 9 Gately Court. First, I want to say congratulations to Dr. Mahan. I'm very anxious to see the launch of full day kindergarten. I can't wait to hear how exciting and wonderful it is. It's a long time coming. Second, I would like to thank the board and the district for saying tonight that all children will be fed and that you're not going to be fully enforcing the current policy. I would also like to say to Dr. Malash, I was so happy to hear about the backpack program. We had talked about it a while ago, and I was so happy when Mrs. Akins was able to launch that. But Mrs. Schultz said we can contribute to that. But I really think the issue is how many people know that there's a school backpack program to contribute to? How many people know what schools it's going to? What's the criteria to get the backpack? Is it for the families who are in free and reduced lunch? Because if that's the criteria, we have that whole pocket of family who didn't qualify, who are struggling. I have taken families to the Cherry Hill Food Bank because they didn't have transportation to get there. And when I go, these are some of the things that I see. You can have a family of 3, or you can have a family of 8. You get the same amount of food. A family of 3 can stretch that food a lot longer than a family of 8. I also see a lot of families from our schools when I'm there. I'm grateful for it, and I hope they find a new location, and I hope they raise money. But those are factors. I think we need to communicate more about what we have. What Mrs. Arroyo just said, my programs that I run are on relationships, and I'm going to tell you, good, bad, or ugly, a lot of families do not trust schools. They don't have relationships. They may have had bad experiences of their own, but for whatever reason, they don't always trust the school. and the system. And that's why relationship building is integral. We really have to build relationships, whether it's through outreach workers, collaborations, etc. Last thing, trying to get 3 minutes in, is when you're looking at the policy, there's a few things that I would like to say. One, the DCPMP policy shouldn't be in there. The commissioner actually made a statement today, the commissioner of DCF made a statement today that DCPMP should not be used whether families can or cannot pay. If you feel like a child is not getting fed consistently at home, that is when you call DCPMP, not just because they have a balance on their lunch. So if there is a way to take that out, because the statute that was noted is about mandatory reporting, and this does not really fit the case. I think we need a lot of input from the community, P&L meetings, but we really need to look at it, and I think we need to be really clear in what the policy is. So if the policy is that the principal or a designee reaches out personally, that needs to be in the policy, and then the schools need to know what the policy is and follow it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Friedel.
Dan Cerrucci, 242 Garden Park Boulevard. I've been a resident of Cherry Hill for more than 30 years. My kids went to this school. They're now raising their own families outside of New Jersey because they had to leave here like many others because of the taxes. Now, I don't usually come to these kinds of meetings, okay, because I really don't like them, all right? But I decided to come out tonight because I spent 30 years in the public relations business. I did public relations for the Philadelphia Bar Association. You might have heard of them, the Philadelphia Lawyers. And let me tell you, when you do PR for the Philadelphia Lawyers, you don't make any mistakes. You're not allowed to, okay? And I got some bad news for you tonight, especially you, Dr. Malash. This has been a public relations fiasco. It's been a disaster. We have a great town here. We have a good town. And by the way, we need no lectures about how it's changed over the last 40 years. I've been here, okay? We have a great town. And this whole thing is turning it into a laughing stock. And this isn't the first time it happened. It happened with the bond issue, too. I sat and watched that bond issue situation. And I said, they're violating every sensible rule of public relations and community engagement. Don't they see it? Don't they see what they're doing? Didn't you see what was happening? Didn't you know that that bond issue was going to go down? I was trained in school public relations by a guy by the name of Dr. Don Bagan, which was then Glassboro State College. He invented school public relations. You blew it. You blew it. And now you blew this. And this has become national and almost international news. I don't understand what's going on here. What is in your head? What are you thinking? Don't you know when it seems like you're denying children lunch over something like $14,000? That it's not going to look good? As a taxpayer here, and the bulk of my taxes go to the schools, I'm fed up. I want it stopped. This ugly little circus has got to end. And it's got to end tonight. And it can end with people in the community getting engaged and putting new people on the school board. Not me, I'm not interested in it. But somebody's got to take the Cherry Hill schools, grab them by the lapels, and all those administrators, too, that get all those big dollars, grab them by the lapels and shake them like hell.
Thank you, Mr. Cerrucci.
Elizabeth Eidler, 459 East Chapel Avenue. I don't have much to say. I just wanted to, as a mom of 3, thank you for the commitment to continuing to feed the children. It means a lot to me. It was mentioned that there are the different types of parents, the ones who frankly can't pay and the ones who are refusing to pay. I think there might be another subsect, possibly the mentally ill, those with or with possibly not official diagnoses, the ones with maybe social anxiety or depression who are hiding from the mail and hoping that the bills will go away. And as the board and others have said, I think that there might be more parent involvement needs to be between the schools and the parents so they can trust them. They will feel comfortable going to them and saying, I can't pay, without fear that their kids might be taken away, which thankfully isn't an issue here. But you hear in the news that with other lunch debts, that could be an issue there. So if more trust is given and received, I think things will get a lot better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Eidler.
Good evening. Pat McCargo, 991 Kingston Drive. I just wanted to say to the board, I appreciate your diligence and your continued conversations with the community about this issue. It's not an easy one. It's damned if you do and damned if you don't. And as far as people saying 14 million or whatever that figure was is a drop in the bucket, you tell a senior citizen like me that you're not going to go after that money. I don't care. But at the end of the day, I still want to see those kids fed. But some may say that the money is a drop in the bucket. Well, a drop in the bucket gets a bigger drop, a bigger drop, a bigger drop. So without a doubt, there's something, you have to find a way to get that, some way. And if you don't, continue to continue feeding the kids. But I applaud you for continuing to have this conversation and get public input, and hopefully, if it goes back to L&P, you'll find a solution that I know this community can come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCargo.
Ann Einhorn, 1017 Edgemore Road. To my knowledge, the students are being fed. I know that our students will continue to be fed, regardless of state and federal mandates. This is why I do not understand this level of negativity and the hatefulness directed at the Board of Education and our superintendent. The policy committee is charged with reviewing the food policy. Let them do their work. Solutions can and will be found. It's a process. Bring it back to P&L. My questions are, how do you make the ones able to pay? How do you reach the ones responsible for the account? How do you get the families to fill out the form? How do we help those that do not qualify for a program? Can we do another food offering? And can we set up a donation account? Please, please do not be swayed by renegade videos on social media and community members that continue to fuel the fire of negativity proudly. The damage has been done, and the lines have been drawn on social media. How to destroy the morale of the school community in 3 easy videos. Your own code of ethics states, I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interests or partisan political groups. I trust you all will remember this in the days to come. To think that this one item, this is my coup de grace, a can of tuna fish, can divide a town so easily is absolutely frightening to me. I still believe in this Board of Education, our teachers, our staff, administration, and the community of Cherry Hill. I would like to thank each person who will take care of our students, regardless of their role and their status. Our students are watching and reading us. It's not a perfect world. We are better than all this negativity. Much, much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Einhorn.
Miriam Stern, 121 Ashford Road. I've been asking myself, why is this happening again? Why do we have another self-created fiasco? Why did our business administrator choose to address this issue, a matter of under $20,000, when our district has major issues to tackle that continue to be put on the back burner? A failed bond that still has no clear direction, 11 years of severe underfunding, which we finally got some more attention from the state for, and we squandered an opportunity to actively push for much needed discretionary aid from the Commissioner of Education. He visited our district. He brought lots of people to see it. Other districts, in the meantime, have gotten $15 million in discretionary aid. Where is our discretionary aid? Why aren't we pushing after that meeting? A widening achievement gap, with one of our high schools performing at 25% in the state. That is unacceptable. And the response to the board member's question regarding that was, let's wait till the next numbers come out. Ongoing avoidance of fixing a lack of ADA compliance in our facilities, a succession of very public debacles responded to in a reactive way. Where is the vision for our schools, for our students? Millions of dollars, millions this year being spent to rebuild crumbling walls that were approved. Why isn't there a vision for where our buildings are going? Why aren't we re-envisioning where our learning is going to be and considering rebuilding schools as a whole, not just the walls? Why are we talking about such a small amount of money? Our profit is $200,000. That's certainly not the full profit from our lunch program. How can our business administrator champion putting kids in the middle of adult issues? I have to question the judgment on that. We don't see the bigger picture here. Perhaps our administration would benefit from reading the Children's Bill of Rights. This is a document given to parents as they are going through the divorce process. Item number 3. Children have a right to be kept out of the middle of your parents' conflict, including the right not to pick sides, not to carry messages, or hear complaints about the other parent. The school district is failing our kids on that aspect. It is time to make a change. And I want to mention, I had the great privilege of helping my kids have a food drive. Today, we went to a food bank that exists in Cherry Hill for not only Cherry Hill residents, but all of 3 county residents. We stocked the shelves, and I contributed to the backpack drive, and I would be happy to pay off lunch balances. I would be happy to continue to contribute in many ways. Don't underestimate the residents of Cherry Hill. We are here to support our community.
Thank you, Mrs. Stern. Do we have anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. If not, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Avadia, and second, Mrs. Schultz. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a good evening.